One loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum. One more loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى نحمده ونستعينه ونثني عليه ونؤمن به ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف بريته ومبلغ رسالاته العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin this first Friday khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We continue, inshallah, with our discussion on the chapter of knowledge and al-ilm. We went through this narration in which the Prophet had this conversation with the people who were in the masjid. And they had gathered around this individual who they referred to as an allama, a person of deep and wide and vast knowledge. And to that, the Prophet responded with, وَمَا الْعَلَّامَ, what is your definition of who an allama is? To which they responded, he is a person who knows the knowledge of poetry of the Arab and the lineage and so on and so forth. The Prophet then responded with this famous line. He said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ, surely knowledge is three. آيَةٌ مُحْكَمَةٌ, the belief system. أَوْ فَرِيضَةٌ عَادِلَةٌ, the science of akhlaq. أَوْ سُنَّةٌ قَائِمَةٌ, or the sunnah and the detailed day-to-day rulings and guidings that we have. وَمَا خَلَوْهُنَّ فَهُوَ فَضْلٌ, and he said the science that goes beyond these three is fadl, meaning if that the human being is able to gain those forms of knowledge, this is great, this is a fadl, it's extra. But if someone doesn't have those other forms of knowledge, it's not necessarily the case that now his faith, his akhirah is in danger, because those other types of knowledge are not foundational to a human being in terms of being a human being. They might be foundational from a different angle. It might be foundational because this person has to provide. It might be foundational because this person has to contribute to his community. It might be foundational from those angles. But it's not foundational in the sense that he is a human being. From a sense of being a human being, these three types of knowledge at the very least are going to be foundational. And we discussed why did the Prophet give to each of these types of knowledge the particular name that he gave. Ayah, he said, for the belief system, because he is denoting that the belief system is something that has to turn into a reality for you. Otherwise, it is simply a sign and a finger pointing in a particular direction. We discussed this. Faridatun adila, a moderate obligation, because we said every akhlaq is a moderation between two extremes, and we discussed that. Aw sunnatun qa'imah, or a sunnah that is acted upon. And we said the Prophet refers to this portion as sunnah because this is the part where applying your intellect and trying to figure out the details of the faith through the intellect is something that Islam has not prescribed. That this is the part where it is sunnah, it is copy-paste. You look at how the Prophet did it and you follow in his footsteps. Sometimes you know the wisdom and the reason behind it. Sometimes you may not know the wisdom and the reason behind it. This is where we ended our discussion. What you find in this narration of the Prophet is that he is emphasizing all three of these forms of knowledge. He's saying that if the believer wants to walk in my footsteps, if he wants to be a person of knowledge, he has to have three categories of knowledge. He has to have all three of them, not just one of them or two of them. He has to have all three of these. When you look into our communities and the way we practice faith, you will quickly realize that within our communities, the general approach is to stick to one or two of these types of knowledge. Emphasize one or two types of these categories of knowledge and disregard the other forms of knowledge. So we'll start from the very beginning. You have individuals, yes, who the only thing that matters for them is their belief system. The only thing that matters to them is, do I have the right belief system? Do I believe in the right imams? Do I believe in the right prophet? Do I believe in this person? Do I believe in that person? Yes? So what about the science of akhlaq? What about the way you interact with your loved ones at home? What about the way you interact with other members of society? This is essentially what akhlaq is all about. What about those things? What about your inner virtues? What about being generous? What about being kind? What about being forgiving? What about being compromising? This whole category of knowledge, category number 2, disregarded. It doesn't matter. Why? Because he assumes he has the first category of knowledge. First category of knowledge is what? Your belief system. He says, I have the right belief system. And sometimes he'll point to other people out there. Sheikh, there are many other people out there who don't have this belief system. They are ignorant from this angle. And he might even be correct from that angle, yes? But the Prophet came and said all three of these are necessary. You don't get to choose and pick which of these three you're going to build your life around. Islam wanted a believer that has all three of these. So this is the first category of people. As long as you tell him that the khulafa were wrong and the imams were right, he's happy. Now you're a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. Regardless of whether you have akhlaqi virtues or you don't have akhlaqi virtues. Regardless of whether you're kind and compassionate or you're not. From the perspective of this person, the only thing that matters is what? Is the belief system of the human being. Are you going to separate yourself from others who don't have our belief system? That is part of it, but that's not the whole story. Hence the Prophet said what? إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. He said knowledge is 3. You need all 3 of these. And you need to give importance to all 3 of these. So this is the person who gives no importance to number 2 and number 3. We're going to move on. You have the second person. The only thing that this person cares about is the second category of knowledge. Only thing this person cares about is that Islam said be kind and be compassionate. So what does this person do now? As it relates to his belief system, from his perspective, it doesn't matter. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheist, stuff doesn't matter, he'll tell you. What matters is your akhlaq. What matters is to have a pure heart. What matters is to be a good person. What matters is to contribute to the well-being of the society and the community that you're living in. What about the belief system? Doesn't matter. And this category, is becoming more and more dominant within our families and within our cultures. This is becoming a real thing. It's becoming a real problem. Are these akhlaqi issues part of what Islam taught? Absolutely. No doubt about it. That's the whole point we're making, yes? But it's not the only thing Islam came to tell us. Islam also came forward and said what you believe and accepting the truth that is presented to you is important. I care about it. And this is why we come across this terminology in the Quran that we have heard so many times. And this is credit to the Quran. The Quran has clarified this for us so many times that at this point we pass by it as if it's nothing. And that is what the Quran keeps saying. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Amanu. They have a belief system and then they act on that belief system. This terminology that the Quran keeps saying. Why doesn't the Quran use terminology like you and I use terminology? You and I, we say the good people make it into heaven. The bad people have to deal with what? The punishment of hellfire. It's not the terminology of the Quran. The Quran does tafsir of who these good people are. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Quran keeps saying this, and it said it so much that at this point, it's become, second nature for us. The Quran keeps saying, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Your belief system matters for me. Yes, God is not going to hold accountable someone who the truth was never presented to. This we understand. But for someone to sit there and say, listen, it doesn't matter what your belief system is. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, this, that. The only thing that matters is for you to have a good heart. This is not the message of Islam. This is part of the message of Islam. But it's not fully the message of Islam. So you have this second category of individuals. The only type of knowledge and science that they care about is as it relates to the day-to-day interactions or the akhlaq that the human being has. Does he care about the belief system? No. At this point, he semi-believes in a form of pluralism. Pluralism meaning what? Meaning it doesn't matter what you believe. And then you'll hear this person, this is a topic for another lecture, I'm going to leave it for some other time, we'll come to this. He'll say, yes, because the Quran says, La ikraha fid deen. There is no compulsion in religion. There's no compulsion in religion. So you're saying God doesn't care what I believe. God's saying whatever you want to do, no compulsion in religion. This is what La ikraha fid deen means. This is how this person will substantiate that point. So this person doesn't care about the belief system. Yes? On the other hand, also doesn't care about the day-to-day rulings, the detailed guidelines of Islam. So if you go to this person, you say, listen, when you go to work, you can't sit at that table because at that table, there's alcohol. If you sit at that table, it's haram. This person will say, Baba, why are you overcomplicating the faith? What all this detail, this sit here, don't sit there, this Islam came to make me a good person at my heart. Meaning what? I have good akhlaq. Therefore, these details, they don't matter. Now the Prophet who brought him that message is saying, it matters for me if you sit at that table. But he doesn't care and he doesn't want to listen. He wants to come up with his own version of Islam. That Prophet, he came and said what? إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. You need all three of these. But he doesn't care about this stuff. He wants to have his own semi-Western understanding of the faith and he wants to move on like that. This is the second category of individuals, yes? And you and I could be in any of these categories. We're not standing here and saying we're not part of it. Sometimes we slip into these categories ourselves, yes? This is the second category. Only thing he cares about, do you have good akhlaq at home or not? Good. Do you care about the other parts of the faith too? Those are also parts of the faith as well. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Then you have a third category, and every one of these categories, you will see them within our communities. You have the third category. This one, the only thing he cares about is sunnatun qa'imah. The only thing he cares about is the more outward aspect of religion. So now he comes across with this very dry understanding of the faith. Meaning what? Meaning when you're doing your wudu, God forbid, you miss a part. When you're praying, God forbid, the fingers of your, the toes on your feet are not pointed in the right direction. Yes? God forbid, the meat that you're eating, yes, that you have to be very careful. But when you come home, you can yell at whoever you want. No problem. Because the akhlaq doesn't matter. Yes? You can backbite about whoever you want to backbite about. But taharat najasat, you have to be very, very... Did you wash it extra times? Yes? I remember I told a relative of mine once, he asked, said, Mahdi, you studied in Hosa and everything, this clothing, something had become najis. He said, how do you wash this? I said, well, if you're using tap water, it's very easy. Yeah? You just hold it under tap water and, touch it a little bit and rub it a little bit and the najasat will leave. After a couple seconds of holding it under the water after that, tahir. Yes? He said, no, this is not how you make things tahir. I said, Baba, I traveled, this is my living. This is what I do for a living. He said, no, it doesn't feel tahir just like that. We have to really get in there and really make it tahir. Okay, so this person cares about all of these details. Does he take the same ihtiyat when it comes to talking to his loved one? And does he take that same precaution and say, this tone I'm using right now, maybe it will upset her or him. Let me, use a softer tone. Does he take that same ihtiyat over there? He doesn't take that same ihtiyat over there. Yes? Why? Because the only thing that matters to this man or woman is what? is the detailed guidelines. And Islam wanted neither of these three groups, none of them. There's a lot of people out there who have one of these three. That's not what Islam came for. Islam came so that the human being becomes a manifestation in all three types of this knowledge. And when the human being becomes a manifestation of all three of these types of knowledge, it will impact his whole life. Every aspect of his life is going to be transformed. Every aspect of his life is going to change. And I'll say this as we're coming closer to, in a week or so, the birth of our beloved prophets, Muhammadin al-Mustafa, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. This is what was so beautiful about the movement of the holy prophets. Because this message that he brought was not a message that affected individuals on a personal level only. It also was not a message that affected people on a social level only. It wasn't a message that affected people only economically, only culturally. The message that the Prophet brought was a message that affected people in every single aspect of their life. From the most intimate moments that the human being experiences, when he's alone, no one else is around. Islam came to inform that believer of what he's supposed to be doing in those moments, what thoughts he's supposed to have, what belief system he's supposed to have, what type of a connection he has to build with his Creator. From that point, all the way to the most outward public aspects of his life, when thousands of people are present, Islam also told him what you do in that situation. And that is why, if you look in history, the movement of the Prophet was very different from other movements and other empires that were put together. Were there empires that were greater than the empire that eventually the Prophet built, if you can call it an empire? Yes? Of course there were bigger empires. But I ask you this, those bigger empires, did they have anything to do with the heart of the human being? Did they have anything to do with impacting intimate moments of the life of the human being? No, this was the message of the Prophet that came that impacted the life of the believer from every single angle. Why? Because he said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. Islam has to do with all of the different angles of your life. It's not just a social movement, that's part of it. It's not just a personal issue, that is part of it. Every angle of your life is going to be impacted by this faith. And hence his movement, and especially the speed with which it spread and grew during his lifetime, after his lifetime as well, is something to be baffled by. It is something to be studied. How did one man show up and bring the type of message that has all three of these areas so deeply interconnected with it, that when the believer believes in it, he becomes part of this ummah, his whole life is impacted by the message of the Prophet. Yes, the Prophet impacted things socially. He also impacted the heart of the human being. So what were the social issues that were happening at that time? Amongst them, there are many. Amongst them, the killing of daughters. Could the Prophet had not come and say, listen, what is this you're doing? You're burying your daughters alive. You cannot do this. This would have been a social movement. But the Prophet came forward and what? Said what? He also changed the belief system of these human beings. He changed their perspective and then also changed them outwardly. He said, this daughter that you're getting rid of, she is the blessing in your house. So now outwardly and publicly, also what do you have to do? You have to follow along with that logic. You are not allowed to hurt this daughter of yours. What else was there? There was racism. Did the Prophet, and you know this racism that we speak about, back in the day, it was more tribalism than it was a form of racism. Ethnicity was part of it. Your tribal connection was probably even more important. What tribes you are connected to, yes? And what type of family and relatives you have. Okay, there's tribalism, there's racism, whatever you want to call it. So the Prophet came forward. He could have come and said, listen, don't be racist. Don't hold on only to your tribe. Don't do this. This would have been a social movement. But then the Prophet came and said, let me change what you believe in your hearts. He said, there's no fadla and there's no greatness for an Arabi over an Ajami. You all came from the children of Adam. This is what? This is Islam, not just changing you outwardly, changing you in terms of how you look at things, your belief system, your worldview. and the many other social issues that the Prophet came forward with. The role of parents, the role of the mother. Islam could have said just respect your mothers. But Islam came forward and said, listen, let me change your worldview. That mother of yours, heaven lies beneath her feet. That parents, those parents of yours, they are the keys to getting you into heaven. It was a different perspective altogether. And this is why the message of the Prophet is so powerful. Because it doesn't have to do with one angle of the life of the human being. It has to do with every single angle of the life of the human being. All of this we understand from what? إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. From the perspective of the Prophet, the believer has to have all three of these angles. And when the believer has all three of these angles, then he becomes one of the most beautiful creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about a person, in terms of his belief system, deep. In terms of his akhlaq, wonderful akhlaq. In terms of his day-to-day rules and regulations, he looks at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to do, he acts on it. This person is a walking muballigh. Everywhere he goes, people look at him, they are reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? And that is what you and I need to strive towards. Every one of us in one of these areas has some strengths, has some weaknesses. Yeah? Some, their natural disposition is their akhlaq is better. So they have to work less on their akhlaq compared to maybe someone like myself. For some people, their aqaid, they need more work in that area. They need to gain more knowledge. Everyone has their own weaknesses. Our job is to learn where do we struggle in these. And then to give importance to that category of the knowledge that the Prophet has emphasized. Inshallah, with that, we'll bring this khutbah to an end. And next week, inshallah, we'll continue, or the next Friday khutbah that we have, inshallah, I will continue in this narration because there's one other big lesson that we need to learn from this narration of the Prophet. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. أثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا ثم أصلي وأسلم على نجيبه وجليله وحافظ سره الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأراضين بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على علي أمير المؤمنين وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في أرضك. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. We begin the second khutbah by reminding all of you and myself to maintain the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We reached verses 41 to 44 of Surah Al-Waqi'ah. وَأَصْحَابُ الشِّمَالِ مَا أَصْحَابُ الشِّمَالِ. And as for those who their book of deeds is given to their left hand, مَا أَصْحَابُ الشِّمَالِ فِي سَمُومٍ وَحَمِيمٍ وَظِلٍّ مِّن يَحْمُومٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began to describe for us some of the punishments of the people who end up on that day receiving their book of deeds in their left hand. وَظِلٍّ مِّن يَحْمُومٍ. There is this smoke that creates a shade, but the shade is لَا بَارِدٍ وَلَا كَرِيمٍ. It is neither cool nor is it forgiving, nor is it generous, meaning there's no benefit that comes from this smoke. And we said these are verses of the Quran that are scary verses of the Quran. And that is not a knock against the Quran. When the Quran scares the human being, meaning he reminds you and I that there are consequences to our deeds, this is not a knock against the Quran. This is the key to heaven. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for the one who enters into heaven. The first step before entering into heaven is for me to fear the consequences of my deeds. At least have enough humility to say, yes, oh Allah, I know that if I do certain things in this world, there will be accountability for the next world. Do those consequences technically, philosophically come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly? No. They come from the spiritual reality of my own deeds. And we discussed this before, yes? But at the end of the day, I have to have the humility to understand that I will be held accountable. That those deeds are connected to me. And the only way to disconnect them from myself is a form of tawbah or some of the other good deeds that I can do. This is essentially where we ended. Okay, these Ashabu Shimal, the people of Ashabu Shimal, the people who their book of deeds are going to be given to their left hand. So who are they? Why doesn't the Quran go ahead and describe for us who these people are so I can know? If I'm doing things like Ashabu Shimal, then I know this is, God forbid, where I'm headed. So the Quran starts to describe for us Ashabu Shimal, who are they? Okay, number 1, verse 45. He says the first characteristic of Ashabu Shimal is this. إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. You know what type of people they were? Ashabu Shimal. This person who ended up on the Day of Judgment, book of deeds on his left hand. Let me tell you, the Quran says their main characteristic. They were mutraf. Mutraf means what? Mutraf, itraf, is a characteristic that the Quran has referred to nearly 10 times in different verses. Constantly the Quran says the mutrafin did this, the mutrafin did that. Who are these mutrafin? Mutraf, itraf, means that intoxication that comes when you engage in the pleasures of this world, the blessings of this world. So what is this? Is a mutraf a wealthy person? No, not just wealthy. He is that wealthy person whose wealth has now intoxicated him. Is mutraf just anyone who has a blessing from Allah? No. He is that person who, for example, is granted beauty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but is intoxicated by this beauty. He's so intoxicated, he doesn't remember who gave this to him. He doesn't remember that the same one who gave it to him can take it away from him. He doesn't remember where he's headed. He is so engaged with this blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran says he's intoxicated. He's so engaged with it that will then push him to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran says the people who end up there, they are mutrafin. Meaning, when they came to the blessings in this world, they didn't engage with the blessings in this world in a healthy way. They allowed those blessings to become the number one thing in their life. Sacrifice everything for this one, because he's so intoxicated by it. He wants that wealth. Now, if you come and tell him this wealth is haram, he doesn't care. She wants that beauty. She wants that admiration. She wants people to look at her. He wants people to look at him. He wants recognition. Now, if you come and tell this person, listen, this recognition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted to you, this fame that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted to you, this beauty that God granted to you, through which you are blessed by people's attention. This is not the end all be all. You can't sacrifice everything for this. This person doesn't care. He's intoxicated by it. This has become everything in his life. That attention has become everything. So if you come and tell her, okay, you need to cover up here in this way and that way, this person will turn around and be like, what do you mean cover up? This beauty is such an important part of my life. What do you mean cover up? Engage in it. This has become everything. Same thing with wealth. Same thing with every single blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants to us in this world. The Quran says, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. These are the guys who are lost in their blessings. How can I know if I'm engaging with my blessings healthy versus engaging them in the form of itraf? Well, just depends. Does those blessings, do they get you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or no? Does that job, that career of yours, that is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does that career push you to sometimes skip your salat? Sometimes not care about raising your children properly? You know, this is a major, major issue in our communities. That this person is so busy trying to build a career that their presence in the house is not even felt. So what's going to happen to the children of this person? I can tell you what's going to happen. There's no guarantees, yes? But likelihood, I can tell you what's going to happen. This child is going to grow up. Who's going to raise this child? The TV, social media, friends that we don't even know who they are. What values do they have? Then you know what's going to happen when they're 16, 17, 18? Then they're going to come and say, Sheikh, my child doesn't want to listen to me anymore. Yes. Where was your presence in the house? Where was your relationship with this child? Where were you connecting with this child, having conversations with him about your values, how they live life, all of these types of things? When were you building the atmosphere of this child? Of course he doesn't want to listen to you. That's a natural thing. It's very predictable. The fact that he doesn't want to listen is not surprising. The fact that you didn't play your role is surprising. So he did all of this because of what? Because of the 9 to 5. Because he wanted that position, and he's willing to sacrifice anything for that position. Yes? I want to get married to this person, but she doesn't have the right values. He doesn't have the right values. Doesn't matter. This is the person I want. So where does that end? 10 years down the road, and you realize, oh, our values are not even the same. I want to raise my children this way. She wants to raise our children that way, or vice versa, whatever the case might be. So what happened here? Israf happened here. This blessing became so big in your eyes, it became your end-all be-all. And then this intoxication happened with it. The Quran says, if this person can get you, this blessing can get you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are mutraf. You are a person who is intoxicated through this blessing. So he says, number one, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. Number two, what else did they do? وَكَانُوا يُصِرُّونَ عَلَى الْحِنْثِ الْعَظِيمِ. And they would constantly insist on disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I ask you, before the verses continue, of course, I'll read verse 47 and then we'll get to this point. وَكَانُوا. So up until now, Quran has mentioned 2 characteristics. This is the third one. وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ. And they used to say, أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَعِظَامًا. Ya Rasulullah, you're telling us that if we die and we turn into dust and ashes and so on and so forth and dirt, وَعِظَامًا, and we're a bunch of bones, أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُثُونَ. You're really telling us someone's going to resurrect us? In other words, who are you kidding? أَوَآبَاؤُنَا الْأَوَّلُونَ. You're saying I'm going to be resurrected and then my great-great-grandfather, who I never met, I'll meet him over there. This is what you're telling me. So what does the Quran say? This is the answer of the Quran. The Quran says, قُلْ. Ya Rasulullah, tell them, إِنَّ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ لَمَجْمُعُونَ. Not only am I going to resurrect you, not only am I going to resurrect your great-grandfathers, I'm going to resurrect the previous nations too with you. Now, you'll meet all of them. قُلْ إِنَّ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ لَمَجْمُعُونَ إِلَى مِيقَاتِ يَوْمٍ مَعْلُومٍ. We're going to gather all of them to a very clearly appointed time. Multiple points to discuss here. The first of those, the Quran keeps talking about these Ashab al-Shimal. Does the Quran say, yes, these Ashab al-Shimal, they had a couple slip-ups in their life, and khalas, now they are Ashab al-Shimal. Now they have to deal with hellfire. Is that what the Quran is saying? It's not what the Quran is saying. The Quran says these guys used to continuously do this. Meaning what? Meaning how many chances did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give this person? Means hundreds of chances Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this person. You and I, when we want to show our mercy to someone, we say we believe in second chances. Yes? This is what we say. Yes? Second chances. God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't believe in second chances. That's not what He believes in. He believes in as many chances as possible. Yes? This is why the Quran says, كَانُوا قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ مُتْرَفِينَ. From before this day, from a long time ago, they were mutraf. Meaning what? Consistency. Number one. Number two, وَكَانُوا يُسِرُّونَ. They constantly used to do what? They constantly used to insist. You know, in insisting on something, there is already a sense of consisting in there. When you insist while you do something, that means you do it once or you do it multiple times. You do it multiple times, yes? You constantly stick to it. There's already constantly in this sentence, I'm putting it that way. Meaning the Quran could have said, وَيُسِرُّونَ عَلَى الْحِنْثِ الْعَظِيمِ. They insisted on doing something terrible. What does that mean? That means they were constantly doing this. That means they wouldn't let go. But the Quran says, وَكَانُوا يُسِرُّونَ. In other words, the Quran is saying they constantly used to do this. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa alaikum assalam, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant this person a second chance? A third chance? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted this person as many chances. You and I may not even be able to count them. وَكَانُوا يُسِرُّونَ عَلَى الْحِنْثِ الْعَظِيمِ. Number two. Number three, وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ. Did he say this once? Did he have one mistake, one slip up? No, the Quran says, whatever signs we sent this person, he kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. Yes, if someone falls under this category, of course, the Quran is very clear. The destination and fate of this person is Ashab al-Shimal. There's no doubt about that. The Quran is very clear about that. But if I slip up once or twice, and then I come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the Quran saying I'm Ashab al-Shimal? No, I'm not Ashab al-Shimal. Inshallah, my path is where? And your path is towards heaven. But I have to have the humility to not be amongst those who yusirruna. They constantly go back. And they keep doing this and keep doing this until the Quran says what? Until the angel comes to them and tells them it's time to go. Then they say, Al-an, now we want to repent. And the Quran says, Al-an, or the Quran said to Fir'aun, right? Al-an, وَقَدْ عَسَيْتَ مِنْ قَبْلُ. And all of this time you used to disobey. Now it's too late. Now you already know death is imminent. You already know you're going. And this is why I want to end with this beautiful narration of our beloved sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Shaykh As-Saduq has narrated this in his book, Al-Khisal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his soul. These scholars, inshallah, sometime we have to talk about them. These scholars, if it wasn't for them, we would never know what the sixth Imam even said. If it wasn't for them, we would never know what the fifth Imam even said. We would never know what the first Imam ever said. These were the ones who passed down this heritage and this legacy to us. Nonetheless, Shaykh As-Saduq, he narrates in Al-Khisal, he says the sixth Imam said, لَمْ يَخْلُقِ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ يَقِينًا لَا شَكَّ فِيهِ أَشْبَهَ بِالشَّكٍ لَا يَقِينَ فِيهِ مِنَ الْمَوْتِ. He said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created anything. He has not decreed anything that is more certain, but that people take it as though it's not for certain, than death itself. It is a concept that every single person knows for sure it's going to happen, but deals with the most as if they're not sure it's going to happen. Meaning, if you ask this person, you say, what is there that you know for sure is going to happen in your life? You'll say, death. I know at one point, yes, I'm going to have to leave this world. You look at the life of this person, it seems as though death is the least likely thing that's going to happen in his life. Hence, the Imam said, there is nothing, there is no yaqeen that God created that people doubt it more. There's nothing that's more certain that's seen as something doubtful, meaning you don't know it's going to happen or not, than death. So this person, this is the problem of Ashab al-Shimal. This person, they keep telling him, okay, you made a mistake. Okay, no problem. God's not expecting you to be perfect. Now return. Now come back. He says, it's okay, no problem. No one's watching me. I'm going to continue on this path, yes? People don't know what sins I'm committing. People don't know what I'm doing when they're not around. It's okay. What about him? He doesn't matter. When I continue with sin, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying he doesn't matter. As disrespectful as that sounds, na'udhu billah, yes? I'm saying it's not important. If other people find out about it, okay, yeah, then I'll repent. But him watching, it's not a big deal. This person, yes, has to deal with the consequences of his deeds. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are amongst those that when the time of our death comes, we are not worried, we are looking forward to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على محمد. Go a little bit more. Go a little bit more. A little bit more. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى الله عليه وسلم. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى الله عليه وسلم. وأن عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد لا إله إلا الله العظيم الحليم لا إله إلا الله رب العرش الكريم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم اللهم لا تدع لي ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا سقما إلا شفيته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا سوءا إلا صرفته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا ولي فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين آمين يا رب العالمين.
Mu'mineen, just a few reminders of upcoming programs and events. Tomorrow, Saturday, inshallah, there will be a private majlis in Urdu here at CFK, starting at 1:30 p.m. Speech will be by Allama Shakil Akhtar from Islamabad, and Noha Khani will be by Subaib Abadi from Karachi. Tomorrow night, inshallah, we will be commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Askari alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal farajah. With a speech by Sayyid Hussein Razavi. The program will start with Salatul Maghribain at 7:38 p.m. And will be followed by recitation of the Holy Quran, poetry, and then the speech by the Sayyid at 8:15. The program will end by 9:15 p.m. with Matamdari and Tugoniyaz. Sunday, September 24th, inshallah, with Salatul Maghribain, we will commence the celebration of Eid al-Zahra with Sheikh Mahdi Rastani. The program, as mentioned, will begin with Salatul Maghribain and will be followed by the recitation of the Holy Quran with celebratory poetry and mankabat after the recitation of the Quran. We will, inshallah, also have a short speech by Sheikh Mahdi at 8:30 p.m. and the program will conclude with ziyarat and tugoniyaz by 9. Another reminder that the Mizan sessions with Sheikh Amin Rastani on Ijtihad and Taqlid will resume this coming Thursday onwards. As always, event details are posted on our webpage, cfkdfw.org, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and to our WhatsApp group. Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, and program sponsors for your contributions. If you are not a member, please consider becoming one by contacting Brother Asif Patel, who is our membership director. And for opportunities to donate, sponsor programs, or help behind the scenes, please speak to myself or any of the existing volunteers. Let us now recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of today's Niyaz sponsors. And let us please also include our own marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد وأن عليا حجة الله صلاة الله وسلامه حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه صلاة العصر الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقوم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ما شاء الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما شاء الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Inshallah, I recite dua wahdat all together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا إله إلا الله إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. لا إله إلا الله ولا نعبد إلا إياه مخلصين له الدين ولو كره المشركون. لا إله إلا الله ربنا ورب آبائنا الأولين. لا إله إلا الله وحده وحده أنجز وعدا ونصر عبدا وعز جندا وهزم الأحزاب وحده. فله الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت ويميت ويحيي وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته.